we were first getting on the phone, first getting on the Zoom, I brought up an interesting story. Eileen was talking about how her church is getting a new pastor, and he's young, he's in his 30s, and how, as leaders, we are called, to lead and to build others. Some of them will, end up leading in our singles ministry. Some of them are going to end up maybe one day being over us. They could be a pastor. They could end up where you step down and they step up, or you step over. And so it reminded me of a funny story. Years ago, I helped a pastor at a church in New Bern, North Carolina, to do singles ministry. He had no idea what to do. He was in the military. He became the part-time singles pastor. And he came to a conference that I was doing. I do a retreat every year called LaborDaySingles.org, LaborDaySingles.org. Check it out. But I was doing a retreat of the former people that used to run that retreat at Ridgecrest in North Carolina. And I met him there, and I started telling him about how to do singles ministry. Well, he was overwhelmed. He's just like, oh my goodness, I've got a lot to learn. And I said, well, let me train you. So I mentored him, trained him. He came to several of my workshops, and he became the full-time singles pastor. Well, a few years later, I ended up working at his church, and he had moved over to the position of associate pastor, and I became the singles minister. And what's so funny is that I was over him, and then now he was over me. But we had such a great relationship and such a mutual respect for each other that it was never a big deal. He was an awesome guy, and he still is. He's now associate pastor in a church in Texas, but we've been friends all these years. But I think about that as a leader. Are we doing that? Are we equipping and empowering and challenging people so that God will move them in whatever way they need to be? So let's go ahead and kind of get into a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. Please take notes. Please write additional questions, because, there's no dumb question, just the one that's not asked, okay? So, or have me clarify something later on, okay? So also really important, the first webinar that I did this week was how to start singles ministry. All of these webinars are going to be available online for you to see again and pass to others. But I did a series of videos also for Eileen and the Alabama Baptist Convention a few years ago. They're also on my website on how to start singles ministry, as well as the handout. So make sure that you've downloaded that, because that way we don't have to go through all of that again today, of how do we start? How do we even begin before we even start our leaders? Like, what is the process? What are the goals? What do we, why are we even doing it? So please be sure to do that. So as long as I can remember, guys, singles ministry leadership has been the struggle. We're great at coming up with activities for singles to do. We might even do a Bible study. We might have, a service project, but building the leaders is the difficult part. Partly it's because a lot of us were never built. We were never mentored. We were never discipled. We never had anybody pour into us and teach us and guide us. And so we've read books. We've gone, we've listened to a couple, John Maxwell. We've read a couple of his books. We just kind of self-taught. And that's okay, because, there are a lot of times that's all it did take. There's that natural born talent that God has put in you. But there's also strategy, and there's also a process, and there's also key things that make a difference in a really great leader and a leader that's just so-so. You've probably been under those so-so leaders. There's people who drive you nuts. There's people who are not an encourager. There's people who don't listen to your ideas. They don't return emails. And you wonder, how did they get the job? You know what I'm saying? I mean, how did they get put in that position of leadership when what they're doing doesn't look anything like a leader? Now you're watching this, you may be already a leader, a pastor, or been a pastor. I know some of you are, and I've learned from you. You may be somebody just starting out and going, we're just starting singles. I have no idea what I'm doing. You may already have a team, but you just like it to grow. Or maybe you just need to be affirmed in what you're already doing. So we're going to get through some of that, and I think you're going to see your answers to all those three areas. So 3 things we're going to focus on today. We're going to focus on what makes a great leader, why leaders fail, and then how to build your team. In all ministry, you cannot be successful without building leadership. It just doesn't happen. What will happen is that if it's only 1 or 2 people running the show, over time, you'll get burned out. You'll get discouraged. You'll get aggravated. You'll say, well, nobody helped me. And the ministry failed because everybody got married. My team got married and they all left me and nobody ever shows up at anything. And understand you can't, build the cart before the horse, as the saying goes. Events and activities and contribution comes from a foundation first. And from that foundation, all those other things come. So you have to build a team of people that have a heart for it. And from that team, you build the ministry. So right from the beginning, you have people that are showing up, that are buying in, that are taking ownership. But what happens most of the time, it's just you with your vision, and you announce a couple things. A bunch of people come to the first one because, let me just tell you, when you plan your first event at church, and it's usually social based. Hey, we're going to have a big meal at the church. They come like crazy because they're coming to see what's there. Like, oh, who's there? Oh, he's cute. Oh, who's that? They're just coming to check it out. And we'll a lot of times think, oh my gosh, 50 people came. We're going to have an amazing ministry. No, 50 people came to check it out. That's not the ministry. The ministry are the ones that do come back and do decide that this is a part of what God has called them to do. So just be aware of that we want to build from the ground up, not from the top down. We want to build the foundation, the roots based on the word of God. And then from there, the team gets built. So even if you're, a year later, you're still at 10 people, it's 10 people who are called to be there and 10 people who get it. And it's better to have 10 people that are sold out than 50 and 48 of them do nothing, which I've been a part of that as well. So let's keep going, and I wanted to give you a little quick summary of one of my favorite stories in the Bible. The story of Matthew 14:13 through 21. This is the story of the fishes and the loaves. Everybody probably watching this knows that story. And they had just ministered to a bunch of people. Jesus had, gone to pray, got in a boat. And as they were in the boat going across the lake, the people followed. They're like, because you know what? When you're getting healed, when you're getting fed, you keep going back to those sources. I mean, I would, right? That's why church a lot of times attracts people, because they're getting something from it. It's helping them emotionally or physically or spiritually. So the people are coming. They're like, Bob, heal Bob. I wonder if he'll heal Sue. And, I'm hungry. I wonder if I can get something to eat. I mean, they're coming. And it just shows us that, guess what? Ministry never stops. The poor will always be with you. There'll always be people of need. So if you're not taking care of you, you will get burned out and you'll be empty. So you're never going to lead them enough. You're never going to fill them enough. You're never going to heal them enough. They just keep coming. They keep coming. They keep coming. So Jesus gives us a model where first he allows a little bit of time to get away, to rest. And then when he gets to the other side, the crowd is there and they're obviously it's time to eat. And the disciples say, send them into the town to get their own food. We've been out here working and we're tired and, they can just go get their own stuff. And Jesus says, no, you're going to feed them. And so for the first time that I see here's an exact situation where God is getting them structured and getting them organized. Up to this point, he's been teaching them and showing them. And now, even in their exhaustion, he's saying, I still want you to do something. The job is still not done. But what I love about this is just the process in which Jesus does this. And it's in verse 19 that's the key. And he said, and he directed the people to sit down on the grass, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks, and he broke the loaves. He always had thanksgiving first, always praised God first to everything. Then he gave the disciples, and then the disciples gave to the people, and they were all satisfied. What I love is that verse 19 where he says he had them sit on the grass. He had them sit down. In other versions of the same story, it talks about how there was a structure to putting them in groups. Right now, we're beginning to see that a part of singles ministry in leadership is that you need to know what's in your ministry. You need to be able to segment it. You need to be able to look at the gifts and the talents. There's no way these disciples could have fed thousands of people. The disciples had to be the first to feed, and other people watched them, and other people watched them. And everybody started jumping in based on their gifts and talents to say, hey, let me get that basket. I'll feed this group over here. Well, let me help these kids. They're needing some food. And let me help these older people. They need some help up. And let me help you over here. Let me handle this situation. because it was chaotic. I mean, just think about what you see today when people are trying to all come together in the gathering. And I love how this is an example of leadership development. That what did God call them to do? He didn't give them the easy way out. He said, you know what? It's hard. It's hard to lead people. But if you put some structure in it, you trust me for the provision, you trust me for what you're going to use in order to minister to them. Not only did they feed everybody, but they had 12 baskets left over. Of course, there were 12 of them. God didn't forget them either. And God is even also teaching them the idea of serving others before you serve yourself. It's a great model and a great example of what God wants us to do. Jesus built the ministry by building the team, teaching them, encouraging them, and guiding them, all by example. Let's talk about what creates a great leader. John Maxwell said, a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. I love that. So a great leader sets boundaries. Just like with Jesus in the boat, there's a time where you have to say, you know what, I got to be by myself. There's things I got to do. I got to get rest. And finding that fine line of serving and helping and also saying, you know what, I need to go. The other day I was on the phone with my co-writer of this new book I'm working on. And he just got through doing a big online webinar. He was speaking on one of the chapters in our book. And I said, hey, can I talk to you? And he said, Kris, can we talk tomorrow? And I said, I need 2 minutes. And we were on the phone for 2 minutes that, if you know me, it kind of went into 3 and 4. And finally he says, Kris, I got to go. Click. I was like, and the next day I said, I'm so sorry because, I was practicing a boundary, Kris, because I said 2 minutes and I abused the boundary. And so as much as I was kind of like, oh, what did I do? That's the point. That's a good leader. He's a good pastor. He set a boundary. He stood at that boundary. And it told me a lot about him, that if he's willing to set a boundary and stand behind that, he's going to also protect other times that we're working together in the same way that I have a right to do the same to him. So another great leader has self-responsibility. They desire personal development. They want to keep learning. They want to keep growing. They want to go and listen to webinars and read books and they want to keep training themselves. They don't want to just stop, even if the course may not be single specific, but it's just going to help them as a leader or help them emotionally or physically. They desire to keep learning. They're relational. They build people, not just a program. They create an environment where they nurture and empower other people. And they have to learn a lot about grace. A lot about grace. Yeah, I learned a lot about grace. They also empower other people. They give other people the power, the responsibility, the ownership of their own dreams, their tasks, input. They give people the ability to make choices. They permit them to do what God has called them to do and how to lead something. One of the things that's so hard is to let somebody else lead when you're not really sure they would do a good job. You know what I mean? Like, maybe they're not going to do it the way you would do it, or maybe it'll fail. Or what if people think it's a bad idea? Well, they think I did something because they are under me. What if they don't know it right? What if it, what if it does? I don't know. Maybe I just have a lot of questions, So you know what? I'm not going to let them do it. I'm just going to do it myself. At least I know it'll turn out right. But what if God is raising up a new leader that's going to take either your place or God's going to move them somewhere else? What if God is using you to lead someone so that he can use them? You're not going to know if you don't delegate. You're not going to know if you don't empower other people. A great leader sees the gifts in people. They see something and they're like, this person can lead this ministry one day. Or this person can lead their own. Or this person has great influence. This person could be an awesome teacher. They just need to be nurtured. They need to be encouraged and mentored. Right now I'm discipling my little cousin. She's 16. And right from the get-go, I noticed that she has incredible wisdom and discernment. And I said, you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if one day she's not teaching me. But see, a great leader doesn't look at that as a negative or a threat. A great leader wants to add to it, wants to help that person, even if it means you've helped them and they leave, which happens. Like, I spent all this time with them and I trained them and I taught them and I came beside them and I checked in with Facebook and I texted them. We had coffees, we had lunches, and then they left after 6 months. Because God called them somewhere else. Don't look at it as like you're pouring into them just to build your team. Pour into them to build God's team. Because surely as you're pouring into them, God's pouring into somebody else to bring them to you. And you just don't ever know who's it going to be and where that person came from. One of my favorite authors, who neither one of them are in the singles ministry anymore, is Terry Hershey and Rich Hirst. This is an old quote from them about giving the ministry away. I love this where it says, relational leadership is giving responsibility away or giving the ministry away. It's not about who has the most power, but who can give the most power away. Rich led singles ministry in McLean Bible Church forever and ever, and he's just incredibly talented. Terry Hershey, another from the old days. Terry is now doing wellness ministry up in Washington State. Two men that I looked up to and learned a lot from when I was younger. So why do leaders fail? Why do leaders fail? Well, ego is a real big issue. It's all about them. It's all about me and what I'm doing and who I am and my authority and everybody knows it's me. And Proverbs 11:2 says, when pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with the humble is wisdom. Guys, of all people, I can be in front on stage every time. I'm happy to, very comfortable with it. But God has called me to build it, to release it. So if I'm the only one on stage, how am I helping to build it and release it? So one of the things that I really love to do is help build men, because I think our ministries are predominantly women. And so I want men to reach men. So I spend extra time helping and equipping men, and I put them up front as much as possible. I put them up front to do prayers and announcements. I have a process on how I get teachers, and maybe we'll do a separate webinar for that, because there is a specific process on how I train up teachers for ministry. But I want to help people get to the point to where they're up front, they're leading, they're casting the vision, they're training other people. And so there is a process where you build a team who then builds a team, because one day, one of those people may end up being the leader. It's strategic, it's purposeful. But when it's all about you and you being up front, even if the person that you put up front is not great yet, they're a little weird, they're shy, but they can get there if you help them and nurture them and work on it together. No vision for the future. You can't see possibly what can be done. Then why are you doing a ministry? Why are you leading a ministry? Why are you starting a ministry, growing a ministry? If you don't see where God can take it and what can happen, then you're just basically giving singles a social club, which again, you'll get burned out of that too. You can't delegate. Inability. And I'm not saying, you just don't know how to delegate. Because again, it comes back to control. It comes back to being about you. They won't do a good job. They don't know how to do the job. What if they mess up? What if it doesn't get done? Well, you know what? You delegate baby tasks first. You know what I'm saying? You delegate people to bring a food item that it doesn't matter if it doesn't make it. You delegate people to come set up, but you know what? You do the majority yourself and then have them come and do the small setup. Or you have them clean up. And then some things, guys, it doesn't matter. Who cares if they do it different than the way you do it? Empower them anyway. Encourage them anyway. Have a specific idea of what you want, but then let it go. Let it go. Some of you are watching this that are my own leaders for the retreat that I do. And you see me over the years where I have a pretty good idea of what I think it should be. And then I've also just let it go. One of those who are watching is Carrie, and Carrie's in charge of all of our volunteers and greeting. And I don't get in her mess. I don't get in her area. I trust her. I know she's going to do a good job, and she may do it totally different than I would. And unless there's a consequence where it's shown to be negative, I don't fuss about it. We just work on it. We look at it and go, what could improve? What could be better? What do you think were the areas that we struggled with or wasn't working well? And we solve it as a team. It's not whether her way is better than mine or worse. It's, what does God want us to do? A hurting leader who doesn't ask for help. Leaders have family and personal problems too, and often a leader feels that they have to be the strong one to set the example. But sometimes the greatest leader is someone who says, hey, I'm struggling too. I've got something going on in my life right now. I'm not happy about what's going on right now in the world, and I don't know how to handle it some days. That's an example of a great leader that I think helps people in their ministry versus, now it can go the other way too. Somebody who's got all kinds of issues trying to lead. And recently was brought to my attention, there was a guy who is in Celebrate Recovery, not because he's the leader of it, because he's dealing with addictions. So he's in this celebrate recovery, but yet he wants to start a singles ministry. And no, not ready, not ready, not ready. But what I read that is he wants to attend singles functions. He wants friends. He wants fellowship. And so he doesn't find one where he lives. So he says, well, I'm just going to start one, even though I'm still addicted to these things. And I had to counsel him not to. James 1:5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. We just got through doing a Wednesday night. We're doing Zoom Wednesday night Bible studies for singles. Anybody here is welcome to join us. If you're not a part of that, go to our website. The information's there. But we studied the book of James in the spring. And I remember that verse that God says, you know what? If you're not sure, ask me. Don't go around thinking, well, I'm the leader. I guess I should know everything. No, ask God. Everybody else ask. And God says he will give it to you to know what to do. Being critical of others, being negative. Recently, I was working on my book, we were talking about how we need to invite people in our life that have wisdom. You know, as leaders, we need to have people that we can talk to about stuff that's going on in the ministry and people that will support us and care for us. But telling 2 or 3 people to help you is good. Seeking wise people to help you, but telling 20 is gossip. So as a leader, you have to be very careful who you complain about in your ministry. If you find yourself going, Sue, can you believe Joe again? He's always late. Yeah, he's always late. And can you believe Bob over here? Oh my gosh, wasn't that the horrible prayer that he prayed? Oh my gosh. It gets out, guys. And everybody hears you as a negative, is that you don't really care, and you become a part of the problem, and you'll lose respect. So if you've got issues with a few people, choose maybe some people that are not even in your ministry to vent to talk to say, I've got these situations. What do we do? Lack of training others. You're like, well, I didn't get any training. So that's the solution because you didn't get training. You don't train nobody. No, you need to train people. I love John Maxwell's books, 22 Indisputable Laws of Teamwork. I have a leadership book on my site. I have leadership curriculum, 6 weeks long. Awesome resource. I created it 2 years ago because so many singles ministries were not training their leaders. They were just hoping they happened. And so I developed this material to quickly, the first 3 weeks are inward focus. As a leader, are you called? Dealing with the enemy because he doesn't want you to grow in this ministry. And then the last 3 are about how to build your team. Great material to help you and equip you. But you need to be training other people every time you learn something. In fact, we're going to be doing it with our leadership team for Labor Day. We're going to start doing training for our group every month because we also need to continue to grow as a team. Unhealthy singles that dominate the ministry. Oh my goodness. I can't believe how many times I've seen this, and people have told me about how people are just, they've let people in the door that are, or I've gone to a ministry and they're like, well, Susie, she's just in charge. She's got all kinds of issues, but, she's really good at making a bundt cake. What? Or Bob, he's a problematic. He kind of, messes with the girls a little bit and he flirts too much, but you know what? He's the one that's got the beautiful house, that's got all the stuff, and we have our socials at his house. So you keep him? Or they have people they call leaders and they're not leaders. They just have money. They have resources, or they're loud. Be careful, because your ministry will fail if you allow them to dominate. And then, of course, not being teachable. Being teachable has to start with you as a leader. If you can't see your own failures or mistakes and admit them, then how do you lead others? When I go on staff at churches, I do contract staff with churches. The first thing I'll say in the leadership meeting is, I don't know everything. We're going to try some things and they're going to fail because it didn't work here. Although it works over there, but it doesn't work here. And then there's some things that we need to try, and I'll be apprehensive because I don't know if they're going to work, but maybe you have experience. So just know, even if you don't like what we're doing, trust me. Because sometimes things that you're uncomfortable with, God is going to do amazing things. And also know, if we try some things that don't work, I'll be the first one to say, okay, that didn't work. And together, we'll work on this together. Amen? So now you know what makes up a good leader and where leaders fail. You've experienced being on a team now at some point in time, or maybe you're on one now, or you've moved up the ladder to lead and you're ready to start your ministry. So what's the next step? Please don't forget the enemy is going to want to destroy this. John 10:10, the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I've come to give life more abundantly. Jesus right away tells you what the enemy's goal is. He doesn't want your singles ministry or any leadership, any ministry to be successful. He doesn't want you to get along. He wants it to be dominated. He wants you to overwork and get exhausted. He wants you to have problems with your pastor, problems where your pastor doesn't get it, doesn't understand. He definitely doesn't want any men in there because heaven forbid you meet your spouse in church, you know. So he's going to keep it a bunch of women, very few men, and the men typically are unhealthy. And that's his goal. So if you know the goal of the enemy, you have to counteract it. You have to look at it from that standpoint of what he's going to do. And you got to pray and do a prayer covering of your ministry on a regular basis. You have to be meeting and praying over your ministry. So in Ephesians 4:10 through 13, we have Paul sharing with us what the structure and the giftings that different people have. He said, he descended as the very one who ascended higher than all the heavens in order to fill the whole universe. It was he who gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, and some to be pastors and teachers to prepare, I hear that, to prepare God's people for works of service so that the body of Christ may be built up. So the body of Christ may be built up until we reach all unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, that's that process, we're all growing, attain to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. We do what we do because we all got different gifts and talents God has given us. We do this to help each other grow in the Lord, to come to a place of unity. We're not always going to agree, you know. Some people are not going to like it, but everybody's in a different place. So some people are going to act like baby Christians because they're baby Christians. But the goal is to get us all to a place of maturity, of growing in the Lord. Because when we come together in unity, we're powerful and we can change the world. So you're called to lead. Now you're like, okay, Kris, who should be on my team? I hear you. I feel called and I'm doing these things and I'm staying healthy and I've got boundaries and I've taken some things off my plate because I feel called to lead the singles and I got a guy leading with me or another girl leading with me or my pastor leading with me. I have a vision for the future. You know, I'm ready to cast the vision. I'm ready to share what God has. Who do I look for to be on my team? How do I build a team? Well, we're looking for people who are fat. And if you've done ministry long enough, you've heard that acronym before. We're looking for faithful, available, and teachable single adults or leaders. Now, understand, not all leaders have to be single. Some of the greatest singles ministries out there had married people on them or married people leading, especially when they were single at one time or a single parent or divorced, because they understand what it feels like. But I've also had pastors who have been married their whole life that had a heart for singles too. So don't automatically rule out a married person to be on your team. Because a lot of times, especially if you're trying to reach men, having a male pastor or a married male to be on your team to help grow other men will be really important. So we're looking for people who are faithful. They're consistent. They go to church. They're consistently growing in their faith. They're consistently attending a Sunday school class or a Bible study. You see their walk is consistent. That means you have to kind of know them long enough to see their walk. Be very careful of putting someone on your team that just joined your church just because they led somewhere else, unless you can verify their leadership at another church. Just be careful. If they're really called to be a leader, they'll be willing to serve for a while until people get to know them before becoming a leader. We're looking for people that are available. If they're already on 3 or 4 different teams of the church, they're not available. And it doesn't mean they're bad or they wouldn't great leaders, but I'm not going to ask or beg anyone to be on my team that are already committed elsewhere. They probably will have to lay something down to be on your team because singles ministry takes a lot of time and it's really difficult to do lots of different things besides singles. Teachable, just like with you being teachable, are they teachable? How do they handle criticism? How do they handle conflict? Also, people who like to invest in others. If you find leaders who are fat but lack the heart to serve you'll have a problem. It's not about them. It's about Jesus and reaching people for Christ. I love the scripture in John 13, 1 through 38, where Jesus washes the feet of disciples. Is that what do people see when they see your team and your leadership team? Is that a big holy huddle where those are the leaders, they're running everything? Or do they see you as people who want to serve? Do they see you getting up and cleaning up? Do they see you staying to the end? Do they see you saying, how can I help you? Do they see you as it's not one person running everything? Everybody there has a place and has a gifting. That's what I love about my team for Labor Day. Everybody has their area. Everybody's good at their area. But at the same time, sometimes we cross over into each other's areas to support each other. Those who have a passion and a vision. Leaders need to not only understand the mission of the ministry, but also have a passion to share it with others. If you're the only one that's ever posted anything on Facebook, if you're the only one that's ever talking about your ministry or giving out brochures or business cards in your ministry, that may be a problem. Now, not everybody's got the gift of gab like me, but everyone, if you really have a heart for this and love it, you're going to tell people. That's what we do. We find a good sale, we're going to tell somebody. We found a really cool article on the web or a funny thing on the web. We're going to tell somebody. Are people willing to tell about what you do, about your ministry? That'll give you a really good indication of what the ministry, how it's perceived by other people. We want people with a variety of backgrounds and ages and demographics, depending on the focus that God has called you to do. So if God has called you to reach 50 plus singles, more than likely, most of them are going to be divorced or widowed, then that's who needs to be on your team. It needs to be people that reflect who your ministry is. It can't be 8 women that have never been married and knowing that people are going to come that have been married. In the same way, do not think you're going to get 30-somethings if you're 50-something, unless you're in the middle of nowhere and there's only 10 singles in the whole county. 30s and 40s really don't want to hang out with older singles unless it's maybe at a conference or a retreat, because they're looking for someone like them to maybe one day marry or minister beside. So just understand that you're probably not going to reach everyone. Now, if you're on staff, you can, because you're building individual teams of those demographics. But if you're a volunteer and you're 52 years old, focus on who you are and the audience that God has around you. And then if God has called you to build a 30-something, maybe over time, somebody in their 40s will join, and maybe God will multiply the ministry, and then that 40-something will go build a 30-40 ministry. That's the best way. It's always better to multiply out of something that's healthy and growing than to split up something that's not that healthy yet just to appease a few people. Let's keep going here. Unity is critical, guys. If you guys, if your ministry, you're not coming together to be in agreement. If you've got people that are causing issues and you've got leaders that are falling into sin or, that are doing things that you don't agree with as a group, you're finding out through the grapevine, you're not unified. And it's going to be unhealthy and it's not going to work. It doesn't mean people are perfect, but you do need to have unity in mind and spirit and direction for the ministry, so that you're all working towards that. Understand, you're going to have differences. You're going to have different ideas on how things should be run. Over the years, I've had casualties. I've had people who've quit and said, oh, Kris has got her own ideas. They don't care about my ideas. No, your ideas were horrible. Your ideas weren't about the body. You're building the body. Your ideas were about doing your agenda. So if I come across as somebody who doesn't want to give into that, I'm sorry. In the name of Jesus, I bind that, But there are other times that people have come up with ideas and I've said, you know what, that sounds like good. You know what, I wouldn't do that, but you know what, that sounds like a good idea. Let's try that. And then other times I've had to say, that's a great idea, but we're not there yet. So probably let's table it and let's look back at it, but don't let me forget because I might forget. But let's look at it again later. And that's acknowledging them and affirming them and telling them that you appreciate their ideas, but at the same time knowing you can't do everything. A lot of times this happens when people want to plan socials. They've got all these ideas of things that we could do, but they're not willing to lead it. And in some cases, I wouldn't want them leading it. Just because they came up with the idea doesn't mean they have the ability to lead it. And it fragments the ministry. So it's better as a singles ministry to have your Bible study every week or Sunday school, maybe one Sunday lunch that you're organized, maybe one social event like a game night or a cookout. Now, remember, if you listen to the last 2 webinars, they need to be strategic fellowships, not just socials. There needs to be a strategy behind them. Your leaders got to be spread out. You've got to know who's coming in the door and who's going out the door. We want to build people in Jesus. Anybody can have a cookout, but we want to be strategic. But those other times of the month, if people want to do stuff, if someone says, I have this great idea, let's go tubing. Well, just pick up the phone and call your friends and go tubing. But we're not going to make it an event under the church because we're splitting up our leadership. And I'd rather our leaders be the things we've planned than to split them up in a bunch of social activities. And then I don't know who's at that tubing. I don't know who's at that cookout. And if it's got the church's name on it, then it makes me responsible for it. But if you as Susie Q want to have a cookout at your house, you can, but only invite your friends. You cannot invite the whole singles ministry because I'm not able to be responsible for what happens at that event. So let's keep going. Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. Psalm 133. Remember, as their leader, you do not recruit people to fill your dreams, but you rather invest in individuals to whom God has given dreams of their own. So how do I find my members? Okay, so you're at a church. Maybe you're in a singles ministry in your town. You're doing para-ministry organization. Para-ministry is going to be more of a struggle because you really have to build a team of people that you do know already. Whereas if you're at a church, you might have a bigger audience of people that you can pull from, recommendations. They may not be people that you know well, but they could be people that other people recommend. So it's a little bit different challenge. So we're going to focus as if you're at a church, just to keep things simple. If you're not in a church, you're in a para-ministry organization and you want some help, just email me or we can have a FaceTime call and I can help you with that. So how do I find my team members within the church? First, pray. God, who do I want to be on the team? Who do you want to be on the team? Prayer is really important. Create a survey if you want to. I've done them through, SurveyMonkey, that kind of thing. I've had there's a few on my website that you can check out. A lot of times you'll do your first initial thing right after church on a Sunday, feed singles for free. They love it. You'll get a ton of people that'll come. First of all, you'll see your demographic right away and you'll know whether you want to continue or not. If you're 42 years old and everybody that comes is 60 and over, you either got to go, okay, my ministry is going to be older singles, or, this is not what I want. I really want to reach 20s and 30s. So that's going to tell you. Number two, by doing the survey, you can have on the survey if they've ever been a leader, if they've ever served. When the survey is over with and you tabulate the things that are on the survey, I would call those that have been leaders first and find out their story. Meet with them one-on-one, have a cup of coffee, see if you can verify, go to the church's database, work with the church secretary and qualify these people. Who is it that is single in our church? Who's got singles background? Who's married that used to be single before? And I would do my research to try to find people within the church. Now, a church I worked at last summer, we advertised at the wazoo that we were doing one of my studies, Jesus Single Like Me. And we had people come like crazy because they had marketed it so well. We already had a large amount of singles coming to the church. And then once they were there, we do a ton of follow-up. How you doing? How'd it go? Did you like it? Did you like it? You coming next week? You coming next week? So out of that, I got one leader, then I got two leaders, then I got three leaders. And then next thing you know it, we're doing table hosting and people are they're leading each of the table discussions. And so it kind of happened at the same time. But in the meantime, I met with every single person, like I don't even know, 80, 90 people. I met with everybody individually and had coffees and lunches because I was trying to find leaders to build the ministry. And that's kind of part of what you have to do too. So don't be in a hurry to plan this big singles event. Don't be in a hurry to plan this big singles ministry. Build your team first. If that takes a few weeks, it takes a few weeks. One of my favorite people in the Bible is Nehemiah. And when Nehemiah first heard about his home, his city that got torn down, he wanted to go fix it. He wanted to go fix it right away. And in our heart, we want to fix singles. We want to help singles. We want to get singles together. We want to gather them. But he had to wait because if he'd gone too soon, he'd have been by himself. So it was 4 to 6 months that he prayed and he fasted, in which God then gave him permission to go. And not only was he able to go, but he was able to take a team, an army, and money and resources to be able to build the walls of Jerusalem back. One of the greatest times in my life was 2 years ago, was to be in Jerusalem and to touch that wall and to think, this is the wall that I've been teaching about all these years. This is the wall that he built because he had a team of people with all kinds of gifts and talents and backgrounds and experiences. But they were unified in building the wall because it had a purpose. Does your ministry have a purpose? Do you see fruit coming from it? Do you want to see fruit come from it? Then we have to be strategic in building our team first. Ask other members of your church, who do you know? Who do you know that would be great to be on our team? Understand too, y'all, whoever starts with you, whoever's that initial group that is praying with you, that is spending time together, may not be the group that runs your ministry. They may simply be the ones that help you start, in which then God's going to help you reach and grow others before you build a team. Make an announcement, social media, obviously, that's kind of a dumb dud these days. If you already have your core leadership, then split up responsibilities. Make sure everyone has a job so they can then find their own team. I have a job descriptions on my website. They're free. It's an editable file. You can just, cut and splice. But what I like to do is I love to give out a general description, and then I want them to write the rest. So if you already have a team, do they know what they're doing? Do they know their job? Do they know what's expected of them? They know how to train somebody else. If they're building the prayer team, building the marketing team, building the teaching team, building the greeting team, how do they build it? What would they tell that other person that their job's going to be? Understand, a lot of times churches say, well, we don't want to make it that much structure. It's too much like the world. And God believed in structure. And I'm telling you guys, if people know what's expected of them, they'll do a better job. If they write part of the job description, especially if an existing team, they'll do a better job. They also will be able to train somebody else to do the job. And now it's not perfect science. Even I don't do it perfectly. But I will tell you, it'll change if people know, wow, this is what's expected of me. I can or I can't do it. And they can come to you and say, listen, I can't do all this that's on this list, but I can do part of it. Could I get a partner? Yes. And you can also build a team of people. Now, some people say, well, I don't know how to build a team. Well, use me as an example. I met with you for coffee. Oh, yeah. I prayed with you. Yeah. We prayed about the position I thought you might be good at. Yeah. I gave you a job description. Yeah. We went through the job description. Yeah. I let you edit it. Yeah. That's what I want you to do to somebody else. Oh, it means I need to pray. Mm-hmm. And I need to think about who could be on my team. Mm-hmm. And I need to have coffee with them. Mm-hmm. And I need to tell them what I'm thinking about. Mm-hmm. And then you give them a chance to have input and say, I can do it or I can't do it. And then you go to the second and the third and the fourth. The goal is, again, is that structure. Remember, I talked about in how to start a singles ministry that most singles ministries are relationally structured. Relationally means we all show up and we just love each other and we just care. And we don't really know who's in charge of anything, but we just show up and it gets done. That's a ministry never changes sizes and never grows. And eventually people do get burned out and they quit. But if it was structured in such a way that we produce growth, if it was structured in such a way that you build a team, who builds a team, who builds a team, you can still be relational. With my Labor Day team, you know what? We've got Missy's in charge of registration in everybody's rooms, but Carrie sometimes steps in and helps, and Kim sometimes steps in and helps. And I of course, I do all the finance part anyway, so we overlap. We've got a new lady that was doing our greeting this year, but I promise you, a lot of us know how to greet. We have a lady that does all of our food and our snacks, but again, we have people that know how to do that as well that have come and part of her team. But at the same time, if she needed to help us out with setting up some facilities or tear down or clean up, she could. See, that's the relational part. We all kind of know each other's jobs to some degree and we can help, but we're really good at our job. And when we stay on our job and we grow in our job and we teach in our job, then our job is better and then we all work better as a team. Remember the foot and the hand and the eye, and we don't need 12 eyes. We need everybody to know their area and to do their area well, but we're all joined together. We're all connected together to make the body work. Isn't that great? So make sure that even upon your core team, they know what their jobs are. We want our team to look like a hospital operating room. We want everybody to have a job, right? Okay, I want a surgeon, anesthesiologist, a nurse, a person who sets up, a person who cleans up. We want everybody to know their job well, train in their job. We want everybody to be able to train the next person. We want everybody to work well together, and we want everybody valuable. That although the surgeon might have more training than the person who sets up, I want the person who sets up, who's responsible for cleaning the operating room, to also do a good job and be valued and important. So if you keep leading your ministry where a handful of people show up and people, it doesn't take 2 brain cells, Kris, to know we need to set up some chairs and cut up the watermelon and, put out some hamburgers on a grill. Yeah. But is that all ministry is supposed to be? What about some strategy? What about some ways in order to power people? And guess what? That person's flipping burgers may end up being the leader that runs the whole ministry. But if you're not training them and teaching them, then all they ever do 10 years later is flip burgers. So once you find them, meet with them, go over the descriptions, ask for a short commitment first, maybe 6 months. Even with my team that we meet every, we're rescheduling our retreat because of COVID. We're having to reschedule it for next year. I even have to ask each one of them, hey, you want to be on this team again? Do you want to, work with us next year? Because don't ever assume, Give people a chance to say, you know what, I'm in charge of prayer, but I really feel like I'd rather be a greeter. But Susie Q, I've been training her, and she's going to take over. Awesome. Always give people a chance to say, it's not my area, or I need to step down, or I need to do something else. So shorter term commitments is usually better. But you decide as a ministry and as a church. I went to a church for years, and then you had to sign up for 3 years. Thinking 3 years, I don't even know what I'm doing next year. 3 years. But it didn't mean you couldn't say, hey, I just feel called to do something else. But that was just a commitment that you made to the church. You want to pray with them. Pray about the decision. Encourage them to pray again. And you pray on the existing team for, like, you get with your core, and you might say, hey, we're thinking about bringing Bob on, and he's going to be in charge of, greeters. Or we're thinking about, maybe all the core has 4 or 5 people and ideas of people they want to bring on the team. You can pray together for those people. Definitely be meeting on a regular basis, y'all. In the beginning, I say you need to meet every week. If you're already meeting for a Bible study, you're already meeting, then take 5 minutes to pray for your church and for the direction of your singles ministry. Because you're already meeting, just spend that extra time. Right now, even during Zoom, even doing Zoom meetings and Zoom training and Zoom Bible studies, you can still pray for your study, pray for the direction, pray for what God would have you do beyond the walls of your computer. Set up a time to follow up with them and say, hey, we've prayed about you becoming on our team and be in charge of greeters. Would you, let's meet next week the same time. We'll have another cup of coffee, and I want to hear what God has put on your heart. Is there ideas, suggestions, things you want to change? Do you have some ideas of your own or direction? Because understand, greeting, just like greeting by itself or a prayer ministry, can have lots of tentacles, can go into lots of things. Because a greeter for your ministry is not only a greeter for your Bible study, but it's a greeter for your social events. It's a greeter for your service projects. It's a greeter for your lunches. So now all of a sudden you need greeters for everything. And who's going to be in charge of that? And who's going to train them all? And so the same thing with prayer. It's praying just for your team. It's praying for the leaders. It's praying for the individuals. Who's in charge of that? Do you have people fill out index cards? Do they fill up a clipboard? Do they get up front and share their prayer needs? Who's going to visit someone in the hospital? Who's going to check on somebody in their home? Prayer gets much bigger than just, I'm going to pray. But see how it can be if you have the vision that God has given you for this to happen. Build a relationship with your team. These individuals are going to be running your ministry. You need to meet with them on a regular basis. Call them, text them. I try to do different things with mine. Some of them I call, some of them I text, some of them are messenger people, some want to do FaceTime. You find out what works best with your folks and contact them. Be sure, though, whoever you've called to be on your team, that they have the skills and the resources to do it. One time years ago, I had a lady who wanted to do our newsletter, and she didn't own a computer. And she said, well, I just go to the library and do it. I go, I don't think we have the right person. Or I don't believe in social media. I get a few of those. And I go, well, our ministry is pretty much on social media. So I don't know how you're going to be able to be a part of the team and help us with this area if you're not willing to be on social media. You can be on Facebook without actual people knowing your name. I mean, you can, have, an anonymous name, but still be able to be on Facebook. Continue to be the example of what you expect from them. Continue to be example yourself, but also what you expect from them. Create a contract. Some people do, some people don't. It's totally up to you if you want to. And then set up your team meetings where you're going to do training, go over the ministry business, problems, issues, things like this. Therefore, encourage one another and build each other up just in the fact you're doing. 2 Thessalonians 4:11. And then working together as a team. Communication is important. They need to know their job is expected of them. They need to have access to you. They need to be getting information. If they've missed a meeting, that you need to get the information to them. Discipleship is important, personal as well as a group. Bring in speakers, go to retreats, offer training, send them to my website, watch the videos. Remember to delegate. Encourage and support each other, nip gossip in the bud, plan and strategize. Be sure everyone's on the same page spiritually. I've had that happen where I had a guy who did not believe in the Trinity and didn't find out till later. You need to know that up front. Evaluate often because things are going to change. Be flexible. Be a bendy straw. Be flexible. Have a plan to deal with conflict, problems, and when your team quits, fails, or doesn't get the work done. Now, understand, I've had some ministries say all of our team got married. Doesn't really happen in my age group, but when I was younger, they all got married. That's why you never stop building leaders. And you don't get your team and go, I'm done. It's constant, 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 constant. A third of my time is looking for leaders, listening in. Will that be a good leader? Who do you know? Constantly looking, because life changes. Singles get married, single adults move away, single adults change into different positions in the church. So if half your team gets married and you didn't have a backup plan, you didn't have some more leaders behind them to come in, then that's a problem on your end. So keep that in mind. Here's some questions to ask if your team quits. Did you define their jobs? Is the task appropriate for the team member? Does the team leader have someone to help them or her with the job? Does the team member have the tools they need to get the job done? Are there things going on in their life that limits them? Maybe they have a sick parent or a sick child, or their job has changed. Have I or someone else spent time with them? Additional resources. Have a leadership retreat. There's the advantages of a leadership retreat, team building, the value of it. You can really bond. Overnight retreats with leaders are awesome. That's one of my favorite things to do, because you really, really can grow. Have everybody wear a name tag. It helps to identify the leaders in your ministry. Maybe the leaders have a different color or something, just to help people identify the leaders or the servants or the council, whatever you want to call yourself. Some people don't like that word leader. Well, call yourself the council. Who cares? Thank your team members. Send them a card. Give them a gift card. Tell them you care about them. Tell them you appreciate them. Because sometimes you get discouraged thinking, nobody really cares if I do this or not. Continue to let your church and your staff know of your needs. But be careful that you don't go and complain about your ministry to your pastor, and that's all he hears. Complain to somebody you know really well that won't tell anybody, just vent to them. But make sure your church knows that, hey, these are amazing things that are happening. People are growing. People are getting married. People are building relationships. People are getting healed. People are becoming whole. Let them know what's going on, but also your prayer needs. Keep track of where your singles go. So that way you can look back and go, my goodness, look what happened. Look how many cool things came out of this. We had 5 leaders come out of that. We had 3 marriages come out of it. We've had, 4 ministries that started. Keep track, because that's going to encourage you. And also, if your church wants to know why you still only have 50 people in your singles ministry, you'll say, well, 25 of them have gone off to do amazing things. Let me tell you who they are and where they're at. Get your singles involved in the whole church. Remember, singles ministry is not the end. It's just a gate to bring people into the church that wouldn't come another way. You want them to be a part of the rest of the church. We get blamed all the time that we're a church within a church, or we're trying to separate singles out. And that's why a lot of churches don't do singles ministry. But the reality is, it's just like upper basketball, women's ministry, men's ministry. It's just a gate. We want them to come in and grow and get healed and get whole. But we also want them to greet in the church. We want them to be watching 3-year-olds. We want them to be on the finance committees. So understand, if you've got singles that are sitting on their butt and they've never changed or doing anything differently over a period of time, it may be time to ask them to move and just leave, because they become a problem versus part of the solution. Utilize my site. Please glean. Buy the book. Everyone knows a single adult FAQs of singles ministry. Dennis Frank used to be in charge of singles for the Assemblies of God, and I put this book together, over 100 questions of 52 leaders in the industry, that'll help you so much as well to figure out what you're doing and how to do it better. If you want 1 year prosperity, plant some grain. If you want 10 years of prosperity, grow a tree. And if you want 100 years of prosperity, grow people. I hope you're encouraged. And I hope I know your brain is probably exploding, Eileen. They're probably going, she's talking really fast. But time went by so quickly already. I can't believe it.
Yes, and, I want to remind everybody that these videos will be available shortly, and you will be receiving an email from Doug Rogers, which will give you the video. And there also will be where you can get the handout. If you missed making a handout, please, go download that so you can have those resources. Kris, I have a question for you.
Yes.
How do you know if you're called to leadership?
Oh my goodness. Well, that's a good question. Somebody asked me one time, how did you know you were called to lead singles? And I'm going to first answer that, and it kind of leads to the other. How I knew I was called to lead singles or start a ministry was when I was talking with a friend, and I was talking about my job, and I was like, yeah, I got to do that. And then I started with singles. I'm like, oh my gosh. And so right there, it was just where my heart was. She saw right away. She goes, Kris, God has called you in a ministry. You have a passion for this. You see people's giftings. You see how to pull people together. You're a networker. And so part of it was having somebody else who saw it in me before I saw it in myself. But farther back, even better, was when I was a part of Solo, Singles Often Life to Others. And I came in, I hugged the walls for literally almost a year because I was afraid they thought, that I wasn't perfect, and they were. And somebody asked me some questions. And this is what's important, is that you have to have your leaders or your volunteers asking people questions about their lives. Someone said, well, what do you do for a living? After they know me a while, not the first question they met. And I said, well, I have my own advertising company. They said, oh, we really could use some help in our marketing. I'm like, oh, okay. They said, would you, be willing to come to our meeting, our team meeting? We're getting ready. We're working on a retreat. And I went, okay, whatever. And I understand, I was living one foot in the world, Eileen, and one foot out. Okay. And so they brought me to the team meeting, and they said, yeah, Kris, we need a banner. Some of you've heard this story probably many times. They said, we need a banner for our retreat, our conference that we're doing. I said, okay. And you're a marketing person, right? Like, yeah, I can do a banner. I understand it's not a spiritual question they're asking me, Eileen. They're asking me if I can do something in my wheelhouse, and my ability wasn't spiritual, a banner, And I said, sure. And I said, when do you need it? They said, oh, in like 11 months. Okay, well, you call me in about 10 and a half months, and I will make this banner. And they said, oh, well, here's the issue. If you're going to make the banner, you're part of our team. You're part of the marketing team, And if you're part of the team, you have to meet, every week for a banner that you don't need for 11 months. And I'm thinking, are you serious? And they go, well, that's okay. We can find somebody else to do the banner. And I was like, no, I want to do the banner because, I really, I like everybody to know that I did it. Because at the time, that was my flesh. At that time, I was about me, and they knew that. So they were giving me a responsibility that wasn't going to make or break anybody else's walk with God. I wasn't a leader. I wasn't having any spiritual control over anybody, but they saw something in me that I didn't see in me because I was still struggling in the world. And they said, well, you don't have to, Kris, we'll find somebody else. I'm like, no, I want to do the banner because then it's about me. And so I said, okay, I'll meet every week for a banner you don't need for 11 months. Gosh. And then they said, oh, we do one other thing. And I said, what? They said, well, we do a Bible study every week. A Bible study? I mean, I gotta open my Bible every week. And they're like, yeah, but you don't have to. We'll find somebody else. Like, no. I'll bring a Bible and read a Bible every week for a banner you don't need for 11 months. Well, it changed my life. And I started going every week, and I became part of a team. It was the first team I'd ever been on. And it was the first time I experienced other people's inputs and ideas. And not only would I get the banner made, but I ended up being in charge of all the marketing. I did all the advertising, all the posters, everything. I wasn't in charge of anybody. I still was not spiritually in charge. But from that experience, I grew as a Christian. And then the next thing you know, they said, Kris, would you serve on our, they had two levels. They had a core and they had one below. And the one below were like all the volunteers. We're the ones who, did all the greeting and all the food. And they said, would you serve on that as part of the marketing team for the ministry? And I did. Next thing you know, I was writing the newsletters. I was writing articles. Next thing you know, and I was starting to do other things. And it went from there. And then they said, Kris, we've seen commitment in you. We've seen faithfulness. We've seen availability. We've seen teachability. Would you like to be on the core? And I was like, wow. I mean, it took 2 years, guys. This wasn't like overnight because I was still struggling, And I said, are you sure? Because I still have some sin in my life. They said, we know. but we see a person that's willing to grow and change. And that's what we're looking for. And that was the beginning of the end, Eileen. I started there and I did that for another year. And then God called me and at that point in time to do more singles ministry. And then it was the next 10 years, it was a growth process that God would get me to where I would become my own paraministry.
Wow.
It all started because somebody saw something in me that was leadership qualities, a teachable person, and gave me something small enough that if I didn't show up, if I said, oh, I'm not going to do it, or I've been to 3 of these Bible studies, I'm not coming back, they're like, okay, we'll just find somebody else.
But they were also willing to hold their level that you had to commit. I mean,
Yes.
sometimes we vacillate and we think, oh, if they'll just come and be a part, I'll just take them every other week or every,
No,
so
no,
you,
no.
they left the requirement
Yep.
still stand.
And the
That's all.
availability part of it is important, because if it was a consistently not there. So here's a good example. Over the years, I've helped build, I don't even know how many singles ministries I've built over the years. And well, start or grow, because my goal is to train you and give it to you to run. I'm not there to stay. And so I remember I had one where I just had this guy, he had a great house, he had a farm, and everybody loved his farm. And he was only at one meeting every 3 or 4 weeks. And I said, guys, he's not a good leader. He's committed to other things. He's a nice guy. Doesn't mean he's not a nice guy, but he's not available. So what would be better is to just let him, when we do something at his home, he's in charge of that. He's a leader over his home. And he's a leader over getting us to help out when we get to his home. But I'm going to take him off the core. Now, if he came to me and said, oh, wait a minute, I want to be on the core, I want to help in the direction of the ministry, then you got to be there every week. You got to earn that.
Right.
You got to earn our trust.
Right.
If you're not valuing it by being there consistently, faithfully, available, and teachable, then how are we unified? And then how do we go forward? So that's a long answer.
Here's a question that I hear a lot. I can't get the support I need for this ministry at my church. So how do we help with that?
Okay, I'm gonna do a quick answer on this, but I want you to go to my website because I've got several articles on this that are really important. This is the big issue that most of us do. This is a typical scenario. I was at church. My pastor just got through preaching like 14 sermons, and he's got his wife's in the hospital, and his kid is sick, and he's got issues. And I stopped him on the way out and said, Pastor, I want to start a singles ministry, and he did not respond. He seemed like he was in a bad mood, and I'm thinking, when did you contact him? And as being a person who ministers to people and pour, don't ask me for something when I've just taught all day long. Okay. So your timing of approaching your pastor is critical. So real quick, in a nutshell, they don't support it for lots of reasons. One, maybe the church really doesn't believe in singles ministry. And there's all kinds of reasons. We talked about that in week 1, I believe, the first webinar. All kinds of reasons. Maybe they have a past history. They tried it and everybody hooked up with everybody, or maybe they tried it because they didn't have leaders, or they had a bunch of married people doing it who know nothing about singles ministry. It failed. And that pastor is not going to do it again because his experience is they don't work. Okay. Sometimes they don't do it because they really don't know what to do. They don't have anybody that has the gifting. And if you're a whiny person, mainly female, do this, not so much men. A whiny female that keeps going to your pastor and you keep asking him to let you start one and he says no, you may be the problem. Okay? Not the pastor. Because if you become that clanging cymbal, that's not a good clang, you become whiny, needy, that he interprets this as being led by an unhealthy person, not a healthy person. So here's what I do. If it's something that you're called to do, and you're walking, you're fairly mature in your faith, you believe that you're tithing, you're serving at your church, you want to have a relationship with your pastors, the leaders in the church, so they see you not as a single, but as a person that's an adult that's serving at your church. You're tithing, you're consistent, so that you're looked upon with respect. Then when time comes and you're like, I'd really like to start this, gather your folks and start praying. Gather, married or single, anybody, say, God has given me this vision. Would you meet with me to pray? Pray for a period of a few weeks. Just getting clarity on what you want to do. Where's your audience? What's your focus? Is it 30s? Is it 40s? Is it divorce? Is it single dads? Is it single moms? Get clarity. Put it on paper. Put a plan down. Do your research. Go to my site. Listen to as many webinars. Order as many books, resources. Talk to people. And also, if there's an existing singles ministry in your city or close by, go to it. Be a part of it. Serve on it. Glean from it. Learn from their mistakes. What would you do differently? You gather all that stuff up and put it in a nice little folder with nice little headings. And then you set up a time with your pastor that's good for him. And you ask him, you need 1 hour of his time. And then you bring your team with you. If it's 1, 2, 5 people, you bring that team. And then you present it like a grown-up that's respectful and responsible. And all of a sudden that pastor looks at that and goes, wow, they've done their research. They know the demographics. They've been praying for 3 months. There's the people on this team are people that I can verify that they are mature in the Lord. They're people that I know that I've served beside and done projects with, and they've been in the church for a while. I see that. They've come up with a budget. They've come up with a vision statement. They've come up with a plan on how to get there. They've done all these things. The pastor then doesn't have to do nothing. And then at the very bottom, you say, and pastor, this is what we need from you. We need space. We'd like a little bit of a budget. We'd like permission. We would like approval. We would like support. What does that look like? Well, support means promotion. Listen is on the website, having a web page. Support is prayer by the church. Money, how much money? What kind of money? Where's the money coming from? What are you going to do with the money? The more information you have for that pastors, leaders, the more you're going to come across is that these people are serious. And you know what? I think they know what they're doing, and I'm going to trust them to this. And guess what? What they're asking me to do, I can do, because these are some small things I can do. If they really are mature themselves as a pastor, they're going to take your information. They're going to pray. And if they come back and say, you know what, you've done a great job. I see all this, but I just don't feel it's the right time. You have 3 options. You can say, yes, all right, we submit to that, and we're going to wait. In the meantime, you know what, I'm going to have a cup of coffee with this group that I formed. You know what, I can still meet with them and do things with them. We just won't call it a singles ministry. We're going to wait till pastor says, yes, do this. Or you can say, I don't agree, and you still feel called. It's called paraministry. It's what I have. You go start it outside the church, but you still go to your church. And then the third is you leave and go to a church that will do it. But I think the reason why most churches don't is because nobody puts together a plan, is respectful to the pastor, goes in when he's in a good mood, and allows that pastor to really pray and come back. When you just whine and complain and say, I just want to sing on that, I'd make you leave too. And I'd say no as well.
Well, and a lot of times, the good intention, somebody is moved by a sermon and they say, we should have this. Well, he's got a jillion things on his plate. That's not another area he can, you've got to use your approach. You're exactly right.
It's one more thing on his plate. So if he looks at it as, oh my gosh, there's something else I got to do, and he has some experience that it hasn't turned out that great because maybe there wasn't this incredible leadership structure. There wasn't organization. There wasn't a mission statement. It ended up being a bunch of whiny older women that were empty nesters running it, or it became a social thing only. If that's his perception, and here's a real big deal, Eileen. I am pro Sunday school. I love Sunday school. I think Sunday school is better than any church that has just small groups. I'm sorry. It's just what I feel. Because I see people grow way better. So if it's a Sunday school focused church, more than likely they're going to have a single Sunday school class of some size. But it doesn't mean it's healthy. It doesn't mean someone's leading it that's right. It doesn't mean it knows what they're doing. So it still needs help. But if it's a small group based church, the percentage of people in small groups is way lower than people in Sunday school. Singles typically don't go to somebody's house they don't know. And married people don't get that. If you're married and you go to a small group at someone's house, you have a backup. But as a single person, we don't have a backup. So to get us to randomly go to somebody's house and there's 8 singles there, that's not how we gather. We gather with a big group first, and from a big group, we form small groups. So when pastors of a small group-based church do not understand that singles first need to come in a group of 30 to 100, that I feel safe, I can choose to leave, I can choose not to talk, I meet people, and from that, I can form those Bible studies of 8, 10, 12 people. So that's part of the challenges. When you're meeting with a pastor who's 32 years old, he's wearing tight blue jeans, and he's, got his hair sticking up, and he's doing the contemporary church. Yeah, me too. He's doing the contemporary church. A lot of times he doesn't understand singleness at all. He doesn't understand. So you have to, in a loving way, in a respectful way, come alongside and show him the value of doing singles ministry and what it looks like. So it doesn't become one more problem for him. Instead, it becomes a solution. And the ministry starts to add to the church. All of a sudden, the church sees singles as a value. We need to keep them because they are making my job easier, because they're reaching people that I don't really know anything about, and they're helping the whole body grow. That's our focus. We need to be looked upon as this is an asset to the church, not a deficit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Kris, I have no more questions that have come in.
Oh my goodness, are you serious? No questions out of all of that?
I think they're overwhelmed. I mean, it's just it's pretty intense. Lots of information in a short amount of time. So I'm sure you might get some emails from folks, and her email address is in there. It's also on the handout. So make sure you contact Kris if you have a question, or there, she got it in there quickly, or you can go on her website for information. You could come on our website at alicebaum.org. I'd get you that information also. I thank you, Kris, for spending. You got something else to say?
Well, I do. I'm looking at the sidebar in the chat, and there's some comments here. I just wanted to make sure. Carrie, you put in here something about it's several years to pick from. I don't know what this means. Which year is it in?
Okay, we got it. We've already taken care of that.
Right. Wow, you're talking about the One Great Sunday material. Yeah. Oh yes, it's linked on the site too. Just want to give a chance of anything else that people wanted to ask or comment, or any of the resources you recommend that you've found that's been really good for your singles ministry, or any additional challenges. Probably one of the biggest ones right now is COVID. And people are asking, how do you build leaders during COVID? The same way you build them prior to COVID. You still meet with them, but it might be by FaceTime, or Zoom. You can still do training. You can still contact them. You can still encourage them. And even if you're not able to actually do physical activities yet, you can still do a Bible study online. You can still, have a webinar. You can still have a concert. You can still do games. We talked about this yesterday on how to do creative things within, Zoom games and Zoom icebreakers. And so we don't want to stop meeting and networking and teaching and training because of COVID. I've heard of singles ministries that when COVID hit, they stopped meeting and they did not do any type of Zoom Bible study or training or continued teaching, and the ministries are gone. You spent all that time building, and now the ministries are gone. So I would encourage you that if you haven't done it, that you continue to keep in front of people. Is it more of a challenge, Adeline, to find people to be on your team when you don't even know who they are because you don't see them, because you don't get to see them? Yes. With my Wednesday night study, I knew a handful of the people to ask them to be breakout leaders, but then there were 2 or 3 new ones that I had knew a little bit about them and got to know them and spent some time on the phone with them and asked them to be a breakout host. And so that may be what you have to do. Max just wrote, the singles now, oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. Max, please put your web address again. Max has written books and other people's books as well. And Max has a book on singles ministry, singles resources. That's great as well. And so appreciate him.
And he's speaking truth. He's speaking truth. Well, I just want to say, I know that Kris has 2 other Zoom meetings following this, plus she gets to do a newsletter. Woo, craziness. So we want to pray for Kris as we conclude this time. And I want to pray for each of you that you'll take this information and let it just seep in and marinate. And again, if you have questions, be sure to contact Kris. Max put his contact information in there, Kris, so you've got it.
Wonderful.
So let me pray. Father, I just thank you for Kris and the great wisdom you've given her. Father, it didn't come just instantaneous. It's because of years of faithful service to you, Father. She has such a great way to give her information, engages us, challenges us, and makes us look at what we're doing, why we're doing it, and that we find our why and go from there, Father. Most importantly, that we feel called by you to this ministry. Father, I thank you for each person that's been on these webinars over this last week. It's been great to see their names, and now I feel like we have a connection. And I just pray for their ministries wherever they are, as they're located across the United States and across the world. And so we just ask that we will pray for one another in these days, that as we take this information that we've heard and that we have in front of us, that we can go through it again and just let that dwell in us so that we can take scripture and we can marinate how you want us to go along on our plan, Father, that you have for each and every one of us as you promised. Now, Father, give us good rest. Give Kris a few minutes. Her voice sounds like she's getting kind of weary, Father, so give her some time to restore before she gets on these other calls. And Father, we just thank you for your love, your grace to each of us. In Jesus' name, amen.